Yes.
Yes.
Yep, I got you. You got it? It's recording? Everything's good. All right. I have no idea. Let me do this and then that. All right. So Proverbs chapter 20, we had gotten through verse 17. We are on verse 18. So let's start there and then get into trouble. Verse 18, plans are established by counsel, by wise counsel wage war. So we've had this, a similar proverb before where it talks about getting counsel before you move forward, make sure you get good counsel, etc. But I actually want to land a minute on the second part of this. It says, by wise counsel wage war. Now, I obviously want to step into the spiritual realm here. This is not about, knocking down your neighbor. This is about waging spiritual battles. And so we keep running into some statements about spiritual warfare. And so I thought I would take a moment and talk about spiritual warfare this morning. I know it's early in the lesson to jump into something. Usually I like 3 or 4 verses before I jump into something, but oh well, excuse me a minute. Okay. We're better now. So spiritual warfare. Let's just talk about that in a minute. First of all, when you think about, let me say the reason that I get into this is that I think we have trivialized spiritual warfare. You hear people talking about spiritual warfare for the dumbest things, for the silliest little things, and a lot of it is, if things don't go my way, then obviously I'm in the middle of spiritual warfare. Right? There's some kind of battle going on, because my coffee didn't come out right this morning. I just think we have this tendency to trivialize, and so I just wanted to talk about spiritual warfare. So first of all, when you think about spiritual warfare, what is spiritual warfare? What is it?
Something that's trying to distract you from God's direction.
Okay. Other thoughts?
One more
That's a
specific.
piece of it, CT. I'm not pushing back. What is spiritual warfare?
Something you realize you can't face on your own now.
Okay. True enough.
Non-human warfare,
Not flesh and blood.
not of the earth.
Good. That's a good extension.
Attacks is from the devil. You're welcome.
Mhm.
Attacks from the devil and emissaries. Yeah.
Okay, good.
I think you need to know your adversary. We need to know the devil. We need to know, not too much, but we do need to understand our adversary and our threat.
Okay, good. So, let me say it this way. Spiritual warfare at one level is a conflict between God and Satan, right? You all know, and if you need the verses, in Revelation chapter 12, verses 7 through 9, where we have the story of Satan being cast out of heaven, right? He was an angel. He rebelled against God, and he's cast out of heaven, and he drags a third of God's angels with him, right, out of heaven, and they're thrown down to the earth. Isn't that fun? They're down here with us, right? So that the first of all, spiritual warfare is a conflict between God and Satan. Now, obviously, this is not an even conflict, because you got God at one level, you got Satan at a completely lower level, but that is what the conflict is. Now, the other thing is, it's also a conflict between God's angels and Satan's angels, Satan's demons, if you will. I want to remind you of a passage when we were in Daniel. If you go back and try to find Daniel chapter 10. Daniel chapter 10. First, you got to find Daniel, then you got to find chapter 10. All right, Daniel 10, I want to begin in verse 3. Daniel here is getting a vision. It says, I ate no pleasant food, nor meat, or wine came into my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all 3 weeks, till 3 weeks were fulfilled. So 3 weeks he's fasting. Verse 4, now on the 24th day of the first month, as I was by the side of the great river, that is the Tigris, I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose waist was girded with gold of Ephaz. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like torches of fire, his arms and feet like burnished bronze in color, and the sounds of the words like the voice of a multitude. So here we see Daniel is confronted by what everyone agrees is an angel, right, who comes before him. So then skip down to verse 11, and here we have the angel speaking to him. In verse 11, it says, and he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak to you, and stand upright, for I have now been sent to you. And while he was speaking this word to me, I stood trembling. So this angel has come to bring a word to Daniel. Daniel's been praying, and he's come to respond to his prayers. Verse 12, and then he said to me, do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. Verse 13, but the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, and behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the kings of Persia. Now, if you'll remember from our study of Daniel, this the prince of the kingdom of Persia in the first part of verse 13, what we said was most of the folks believe that these are demons who are responsible for certain areas of the world, right? So you have a prince of the kingdom of Persia. This is the demon who's responsible for Persia. So this angel is coming down to Daniel, and he runs into a demon who is fighting against him to keep him from bringing the message to Daniel. And so Michael, one of the archangels, has to come to actually help him to overcome this prince of the kingdom of Persia. And if you look at the end of the verse, it says, I've been left alone there with the kings of Persia. In other words, there were several demons that he was fighting against in order to bring this word to Daniel. And Michael had to come down and help him to get through those demons so that he could bring this word to Daniel. What the word is not important for us right now. The point is, there's a spiritual battle between God and Satan, right? And as I said, there's a spiritual battle between God's angels and the demons and Satan's angels, right? And this is just one picture of that we get to see, because this angel has kind of brought it forward that he ran into some of the demons. He had to bring Michael down in order to defeat them and move forward. So when we talk about spiritual warfare, most of spiritual warfare is stuff we don't see, right? It's a battle between God and Satan. It's a battle between the angels who are trying to help us, who are trying to bring information to us, who are protecting us. I mean, most of spiritual warfare we do not see. All right, so that's the other thing. The other part of spiritual warfare is between Christ and everything that's arrayed against God, right? All of the demons, all of Satan's tricks. So I want you to turn to 1 Corinthians a minute. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. See what I'm talking about. First Corinthians 15, verse 24. I'm having trouble finding 1 Corinthians. I know it's in here. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 24. Mine says this. Then comes the end. Jesus is talking about when Satan is destroyed. Then comes the end, when he delivers the kingdom of God, the Father, when he puts the end to all rule and all authority and all power. For he must reign till he has put all enemies under his feet. So this is when Christ returns, right? And what he says is that Christ is going to defeat all rule, all authority, and all power. all the things that are that have been put together against, this is the Antichrist, this is the false prophet, right? All of that has been brought to bear against Christ. He is going to rule over them and defeat them. So again, there's a battle going on between Christ and all the rules and authorities. Now, go back in 1 Corinthians to chapter 10, because there's a really, really important little verse here that you may not catch. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 19 and 20. 1 Corinthians 10, 19 and 20. He's talking here, Paul is talking here about idolatry, and he gets to 19 and he says, "What am I saying then? That an idol is anything, or what is offered to idols is anything?" Right? So he's talking about these false idols that have been brought forward, and he's saying, what's the big deal about idols? Verse 20, "Rather that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons and not to God. I do not want you to have fellowship with demons." So what he's saying to them is, the idols themselves are no big deal, right? They're wood, they're rocks, right? That's not the important thing. The important thing is those idols have been put forward by Satan. They've been put forward by demons, right? They've been set up as something to be worshipped by demons. And so when you are worshiping those idols, you are worshiping demons. And he says, I don't want you to have fellowship with demons. So what am I trying to say here? Satan is active in setting up false thinking, false idols, false religions, false philosophies. And when we agree with those philosophies, when we take them in, what we're actually doing is worshiping demons. What we're actually doing is making sacrifice to demons by accepting those thoughts, by going along with those thoughts. So whatever contradicts God's truth is actually demon worship. If you go along with an idea that contradicts God's truth, you're worshiping the devil. Does that make sense? Y'all don't look convinced.
Yes.
Right? I mean, Satan has set up idols, has set up false religions, false thinking. And if you go along with that, then you're going along with Satan. You're on his team. He loves that you go along with that idea, whatever that. And boy, these ideas are all over the world today, right? And we're expected to go along with those ideas that are contradictory to God's word, that are contradictory to his truth. When we go along with those ideas, Satan loves that because we're worshiping an idol that he has set up. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
This is a really important brain thing for you to get. We're going to go back into it again, but that's the first statement. All right, so Satan is working and fighting this spiritual battle. What is Satan trying to do? What's his purpose?
Kill, steal, and destroy.
Mhm.
Yeah, so go to 1 Peter chapter 5. Took forever to get 1 Corinthians, but 1 Peter just dropped open. 1 Peter chapter 5. Again, to a verse that you know, but let's just remind us again. First Peter chapter 5, verse 8. Right? Mine says, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour." What is Satan trying to do? Devour people. What is Satan trying to do? He's trying to keep people from coming to Christ, right? He's trying to keep them with him going to hell. The main thing here is, and it's a really important point, the primary battle in spiritual warfare is about salvation. Okay? The primary war that's going on is about the salvation of people, about bringing them to Christ. That's the main war between God and Satan, between Christ and all of the powers, right? That's the main war that's going on between all the angels back and forth. It's about salvation. Now, God would also love to steal, Satan would also love to steal some of God's glory in our lives by having us do something stupid, i.e. sinning, right? But frankly, those are just errors in Satan's bigger battle against salvation. He's trying to make us look stupid so that other people look at us and go, oh, those Christians are a bunch of hypocrites. Those Christians don't know what they're doing. Or he gets into our heads and goes, oh, well, you really shouldn't speak about Christ because you're a ding-a-ling and you have sin in your life. The main battle is about salvation. And he messes with us. He messes with us in order to win the battle about salvation. Now, what is Satan's major tool? What's his major, the primary way that he works?
Deception.
Deception, right? In John 8:44, he's the liar and the prince of liars, right? He's all about lying. And then in since you've been to Corinthians, go back there. We're going to spend a couple more minutes in go to 2 Corinthians chapter 11. By the way, the Corinthians were a mess. They were overrun by spiritual warfare going on, and so there's a lot in Corinthians that has to talk about that. But 2 Corinthians 11, verse 13, it says, "For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into apostles of Christ. For no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. Therefore it is no great thing if his ministers also transform themselves into ministers of righteousness, whose end will be according to their works." Deception, lying, right? Satan and his demons transform themselves into angels of light, into people who are that look good, that look like they're bringing a good word, who look like they're trying to be helpful, but they have set up a idol, which then people follow. So again, they're worshiping demons, right? They're worshiping Satan. They're worshiping what he has set up. Because again, this is a deception. It's not the truth. The big battle is between the truth and deception in order to win the battle about salvation. In 2 Corinthians, go back to chapter 4. Verse 3, 2 Corinthians 4:3 says, "But even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing, whose minds the God of this age has blinded, who do not believe, lest the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine on them." Right? So Satan is blinding their minds, is filling their minds with other stupid stuff, having them follow after demons so they don't actually listen to what God's truth is. All right, now having said all that about the battle and said all that about what the conflict is, my question then is, what is our role in the war? There's a war going on. And what is our role in that spiritual battle?
Not to be deceived.
I'm sorry, CT, I didn't hear you.
Not to be deceived.
Not to be deceived ourselves. Good.
I'd say praying and giving it over to the Lord, giving it to God.
Giving what to God, CT? I mean, Russell?
Giving it to God, giving the situation to God. Get out of the way and let him handle it.
Okay,
Well,
agree.
Speak the truth.
Speak the truth. Good.
Paul talks in Ephesians about spiritual armor in detail. So we're, and that's to us. So we are to take on spiritual armor, and which would imply that we are soldiers of some sort in that. I mean,
All right.
what our, I
Good.
don't,
No, that's good. You're getting there now. Go to First Timothy though. We're going to get to Ephesians. I'm sorry.
Not always battle with the word. I mean, that is what we use, is the word. That's what Jesus used when he was tempted and stuff. So you always battle with the word.
And Debbie, we can't say this enough, so I'm going to say it here and I'm going to say it again later, right? This is a battle between truth and deceitfulness, right? So the word is truth.
That's
And
right.
using the word as the way we battle is critical to this. But I want to go back a step, go back to First Timothy chapter 1. First Timothy chapter 1. By the way, while you're turning, let me just tell you, I'm very upset with the pastor. So he announced the other day, right, that his next lesson is going to be on the books of John, right? So what am I planning? My plan was after we leave Proverbs to go to the books of John. So I'm really annoyed with him, right? So now actually, he's going to get this done in a couple of weeks, and we'll still be in Proverbs at that point. By the time I get to John, you guys will have forgotten everything that he's taught you anyway, so it'll be okay. But I just thought that was funny. Anyway, First Timothy chapter 1, verse 18. Chapter 1, verse 18. It says, "This charge I commit to you, son Timothy, according to the prophecies previously made concerning you, that by them you may wage the good warfare, having faith and a good conscience, which some have rejected concerning the faith, have suffered shipwreck." In verse 18, it says, that you may wage the good warfare, that you may wage the war. So here's a very, very, very important statement. Our role in this war is not defensive. It's offensive. We're to wage the war. I'm going to say more about that in a minute, but that's a key point. And even where we started back in Proverbs, the whole point of it was he says to wage war. It's an offensive battle that we're supposed to be a part of. While we're in Timothy, go to 2 Timothy chapter 2. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 3. 2 Timothy 2:3. Mine says, "You therefore must endure hardship as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. No one engaged in warfare entangles himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who enlisted him as a soldier." So to Hugh's points earlier, yeah, you're supposed to be a soldier, right? This is 2 Timothy chapter 2. Yeah, okay. So you're not supposed to entangle yourself with the affairs of this life, i.e., you're not supposed to be so entangled in this life, worried about the stuff of this life, that you can't be a good soldier. That you're so wrapped up in worrying about the stuff in this life that you're not doing your soldiering duties. And verse 3 says, you will endure hardship as a good soldier. Don't expect it to be easy. Expect there to be some suffering. Now, to several of you who got to the next point, which is how do we actually wage war? I want you to go to 2 Corinthians. We're eventually going to get to Ephesians, but I want you to start in 2 Corinthians chapter 10. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, we'll start at verse 3. It says, 2 Corinthians 10:3 says, "For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh." So let me just stop right there, right? And some, I don't know, it was Russell or somebody mentioned this before. Now I want you to hold your finger in 2 Corinthians and turn to Ephesians chapter 6. Can you do that? It's not very far away. Ephesians chapter 6, and I want to actually look at verse 12 and 13. So in 2 Corinthians, it says this is not a battle about flesh. And then in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, it says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all to stand," right? So this, first of all, this is not about flesh and blood. It's about principalities, powers, rulers of darkness. Now, you got to just pause there in your brain and go, do I believe in all that stuff? Do I believe that there are principalities and powers and rulers of darkness and spiritual hosts who are involved in some battle, and I'm involved in that battle? Do I believe that? Go back now to 2 Corinthians. Keep your finger in Ephesians. We'll be flipping back there again. Go back to 2 Corinthians chapter 10. And by the way, this is not a 10-part lesson on spiritual warfare. This is a 1/3 part lesson on spiritual warfare, just in case. I'd like to spend a lot more time here, but we're not going to. All right, verse 3 again. "For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh." Verse 4, "For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments, and every high thing that exalts against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ, and being ready to punish all disobedience when your obedience is fulfilled." So the thing that jumps out at me gigantically in those verses are, this is an active thing that we're supposed to be involved in. Look what it says. "The weapons of warfare are not carnal, but mighty God for pulling down strongholds." We're supposed to be pulling down strongholds. We're supposed to be casting down arguments. We're supposed to be casting down every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. We're supposed to be bringing every thought into captivity. And that's just not our thoughts. I think we get stuck here thinking, I got to bring all my thoughts in. No, this is other thoughts. This is thinking. Bring thinking into captivity to the obedience of Christ. This is a very proactive war that we're supposed to be a part of. Pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments. Now go back to Ephesians. And this is where I think we have gotten messed up in our thinking about spiritual warfare. So if you look at verses 13 and following, we have here the armor of God, right? "Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand in the evil day, and having done all to stand. Stand therefore, having girded your waist with truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness, having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, which you may be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked one. Take the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, being watchful to this end with all perseverance and with supplication for all the saints. And for me, that utterance may be given to me, that I may open my mouth boldly to make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains," etc. So here's, I think, where we have messed up in our thinking. And that is, we read all of this, and the one word we come away with is the word stand. It's put on all this armor and stand. Just stand there and wait for the attacks. Wait for the fiery darts. Get your shield up. Put your helmet on and wait for Satan to attack. I think that is a gross misinterpretation of this. If you go back to verse 13, Therefore, take up the whole armor of God that you may be able to withstand the evil day, and having done all, stand. Which to me takes us back to 2 Corinthians chapter 10, right? Having done all means pulling down the strongholds, casting down the arguments, casting down the high places, bringing every thought into captivity. God expects us to wage war. You're supposed to put on all this armor. I think we look about, some of you have visited museums where there's this armor, right? And it's just standing there and it looks very beautiful. And I think that's the way we think about spiritual warfare. Put on all this beautiful armor and stand there and wait for somebody to attack you. That is not what it's about. You're putting on your armor so that you can go into battle, so that you can wage war, so that you can pull down strongholds. What are these strongholds? What is this war? It's against bad thinking. It's against lying and deception. It's against false prophets. It's against false religions. And false religions are all around us. They're not just called religions, right? It's all the philosophies and thinking that's in the world today that we're supposed to be attacking. We're supposed to be pulling down. Y'all don't believe me. I can just tell in your faces, you're going, yeah, Rich, yeah. We are God's army to be doing this job for salvation, the salvation of the world, to bring others out of captivity. And we're standing there in this beautiful armor saying, well, I'm okay. I just deflected another fiery dart. Woohoo! Am I good or not? Well, and by the way, I had to clean my armor because it was really messy. Oh my gosh, this is not the war. All right, so let's go all the way back to Proverbs. Why did I jump here? Because it says, plans are established by counsel, and by wise counsel, wage war. Wage war. Look, skip over to chapter 21 for just a minute. In chapter 21, verse 22, it says, a wise man scales the city of the mighty and brings down the trusted stronghold. Right? If you have this, so I've been trying to convince you all for several months that you are the Navy SEALs of the Christian life, right? You are the elite. You are the special. You are the ones who God has picked out. And why? To wage this daggum war, to scale the city, to bring down the strongholds. Okay. Actually, only God can convince you of that. So I'm just laying it out. Let him work on you later. All right, let's go back to our study of Proverbs. So verse 18, right? Plans are established by counsel, and by wise counsel wage war. And then as we go to verse 19, it says, he who goes about as a talebearer reveals secrets. Therefore, do not associate one who flatters with his lips. What he's really saying there, he's connecting this to verse 18. Make sure the counsel you have is wise, right? Make sure that the ones that you talk to can keep your confidence. They don't just flap their lips. It says here flatters with his lips. In the Hebrew, it just says he flaps his lips, right? This is not just a yes man. This is someone who will give you honest feedback, who will give you good counsel. Make sure you have good counsel as you go to wage war, as you go into the spiritual warfare. Make sure you know what you're talking about. Now, I said that. Now some of you are going to go, well, I don't know what I'm talking about, so I'm not going to wage war. Oh, boy. You're the elite, dagnabbit. Verse 20. Whoever curses his father or his mother, his lamp shall be put out in deep darkness. I want you to remember, go back to Matthew chapter 15, something that we studied in Matthew that you may not remember. It was just a little sidelight, but it's important now in connection with this verse. Matthew chapter 15, verse 3. Matthew chapter 15, verse 3. Jesus again talking with the Pharisees. He says, he answered and said to them, why do you transgress the commandment of God because of your tradition? For God commanded, saying, honor your father and your mother, and he who curses father or mother, let him be put to death. But you say, whoever says to his father or mother, whatever profit you might have received from me is a gift from God. And you remember at the time we talked about this idea that the Pharisees had called Corbin, Corbin, and the idea was that you had to pay your tithes, you had to pay your gifts to the temple, and you had to do that even at the expense of your parents, even at the expense of the money that you would normally take care of your parents. And what they would rationalize this and say, well, if you give the money to God, it's just like giving the money to your parents because he's going to take care of them. And so as a result, a lot of the Israel nation was ignoring their parents, not taking care of them, not helping them in situations where they were, and doing what the Pharisees said. So this is what he's talking about here then when he talks about the parents. I've lost my place. Whoever curses his father and mother, what he's doing there is he's not taking care of them. He's not honoring them. He's instead doing what the Pharisees are doing. And look at the result. His lamp will be put out in deep darkness. You're in deep doo-doo if you don't take care of your parents. And I know many of you are in the throes of that, and you're doing great work. You're doing God's work in doing that. So bless you for it. Verse 21. An inheritance gained hastily at the beginning will not be blessed at the end. And this is again connected to verse 20. This is the son who takes the inheritance from his father and in doing so curses his mother and father. He will not be blessed at the end. No, he's going to be in trouble because whatever money he has gotten from this transaction is not going to be blessed, not going to be blessed by God. Verse 22. Do not say, I will recompense evil. Wait for the Lord, and he will save you. Right? Do not. This takes us back to Romans chapter 12. We don't have to turn there. Romans chapter 12, if you need the reference though, 17 to 19, where God says, vengeance is mine, I will repay. Right? And so this is again when people attack us, when stuff happens to us, our human reaction, again, is to slap back, is to hit back, is to respond in a negative way. And God says, no, vengeance is mine. And what does he want us to do? Wait. Wait for the Lord, for he will save you. If you need another verse, Psalm 27:14 says, wait, and he will strengthen thine heart. Right? He will allow you to bear it. He will give you the strength not to hit back, not to respond in the wrong way. So this is all about the gap that we've talked about before, right? When something happens, don't seek vengeance, but rather wait. Allow God to strengthen your heart in that situation. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to grow your heart. And he even uses those stupid people, right? Who annoy you, who cut you off in traffic, who say something stupid, right? He uses them to grow your heart through waiting. A very painful thing for us to do. Verse 23. We talked about this a little bit last time, but diverse weights are an abomination to the Lord, and dishonest scales are not good. So yes, he's certainly talking about commerce here, but I think the bigger picture is the scales that we use to weigh people, the measure that we use to weigh humans. And the first of that is how we weigh ourselves. Remember, there was this whole conversation about, hey, I'm good, I'm all right, I don't have any problems, right? I have made my heart clean, I don't have any sin, all the way back in verse 9, right? It's the same thing here. Are you using dishonest scales about yourself, saying how wonderful you are, how everybody loves you, and you're beautiful, Or are you being honest in the scale you're weighing yourself in so that you see yourself as blessed are the mourning over my sin, over myself, right? Blessed are those that mourn. Hmm. And then the second thing I think is dishonest scales about other people. We're not using God's scales when we look at other people. We're using our own, right? The ones we've created about what is a good person, what is a valuable person, what is a worthy person. We have our own set of scales and we are messed up. And so I think this is what God is talking about here. Diverse weights and are an abomination to the Lord. Dishonest scales are not good. God hates this stuff. When it's, do not judge, right? It's that. It's saying the same thing here. We're being judgmental. We're throwing people under the bus because of the way we're measuring them. Verse 24. A man's steps are of the Lord. How can a man understand his own way? This is a crazy verse. How can a man understand his own way? A man can't understand his own way. I do want you to go to Romans chapter 7. It's been several years since we studied Romans. You may forget this one. It's one of the best places in Romans. By the way, if you're ever you need to go deep, Romans 6, 7, and 8, you just can't go wrong spending a couple of years in those 3 chapters. But anyway, Romans chapter 7, verse 15. This is Paul going crazy, right? Paul in Romans 7:15. For what I am doing, I do not understand. And what will I do? That I do not practice. What I hate, that I do. If then I do what I do not do, I agree with the law that it is good. And now it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells in me. For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, nothing good dwells. For to will is present with me, but how to perform what is good I do not find. For the good that I will to do, I do not do, but the evil I will not to do, that I practice. Now if I do what I do not do, it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells in me. I find then a law that is evil and present within me, the one that wills to do good. For I delight in the law of God according to the inward man, but I see another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind, and bringing me to captivity to the law of sin which is in my members. O wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death? And the answer is in verse 25. But this is I believe exactly what he's talking about here in Proverbs 24. A man steps toward the Lord's. How can a man understand his own way? A man does not understand his own way. He doesn't get himself. We do not understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. I've said kind of the overall theme for all of my teaching is, why am I doing the things that I'm doing? That's the overall big question. And it's a lifelong study to try to figure out, why in the world am I doing the dumb things or the good things that I'm doing, right? If we understand why we're doing what we're doing, we may actually change what we're doing. And then, what has become to me, go to Acts chapter 17. This verse just has jumped out at me in the last, since we've been studying Proverbs. I know Acts is in here too. Acts chapter 17, verse 28. Acts 17:28. It's one of those that I put an asterisk on. For in him we live and move and have our being, as also some of our own poets have said, for we are his offspring. It's that first part. In him we live and move and have our being. I don't know what that means. That's deep. In him we live, we move, and we have our being. I don't understand me. I don't understand what I'm doing. But somehow it's in him that we live, we move, we have our being. Maybe I can't understand my ways, but I can learn his ways and get closer to him. I don't know. There's something there, something for pondering. Verse 25. A wise king, it is a snare for a man to devote rashly something as holy and afterward reconsider his vow. Right? It's a snare for a man to say, this is holy, this is important, this is something that I believe, right? And then afterward reconsider. We're saying that, to say to God, this is, I really want to change. I really want to do what you want me to do. I really want to be a soldier in the fight. I really want to get off the sidelines. I really want to get my armor dirty. And then afterwards say, I don't know. I got mud thrown at me, Lord. I didn't like that. It's a snare. So be careful what you say. Why? Because you don't understand yourself, right? Be careful about what you promise God. You don't even understand your own thinking. And you're going to make a promise to God? You're going to make a vow to God? Yeah. Verse 26. What time is it? Oh, we're good. Verse 26. A wise king sifts out the wicked and brings the threshing wheel over them, right? And really, this is about God, right? That he is going to separate out the wheat and the chaff, and he brings the threshing wheel over them. He crushes them in order to determine what is the wheat and what is the thrash and what is the other stuff, wheat and what is it?
Chaff.
I lost the word. It's up there somewhere. Chaff. There it is. Thanks. The wheat and the chaff. The wise king. The point is there, God sometimes brings discipline in order to clarify the wheat and the chaff. The threshing wheel crushes them, goes over the top of them. Verse 27. The spirit of a man is the lamp of the Lord, searching all the inner depths of his heart. Now, I think this is where the translation gives us a little trouble. The actual word that should be here is the breath of a man is the lamp of the Lord. And I really think, and some of you may have it this way, but it really should be the words of a man are the lamp of the Lord. In other words, the words that you say are the way that God understands what's in your heart. You give God a lamp into the inner depths of your heart by the stuff that comes out of your mouth. Yeah, that stuff. Verse 28. Oh, by the way, and God uses this discernment that he gets here, right, by searching the inner depths in order to figure out what needs threshing back in verse 26. 28. Mercy and truth preserve the king, and by loving kindness he upholds his throne. Right? Mercy and truth. This is what signifies a good king. Obviously, this is what signifies Christ. This is the battle that has been waging, right? The good king is waging this battle about mercy and truth. And it's loving kindness towards the soldiers that upholds his throne. Just bring all those thoughts together, right? The battle is about mercy and truth against deception, and it's loving kindness towards the soldiers that upholds the throne. Verse 29. The glory of young men is their strength, and the splendor of old men is their gray head. And when he talks about here the splendor of old men, he's really talking about wisdom. And I think what he's saying in this passage is there's a community that's needed between the young men and the old men, the wisdom and the strength brought together in this battle, right? You need the perseverance and the excitement and the energy of the young men, but you also need the wisdom and the experience of the old men. Now we're going to end with verse 30 because verse 30 is a terrible verse to end on. It says, blows that hurt cleanse away evil, as do stripes the inner depths of the heart. So most of the commentaries say here, in fact, all the commentaries say here, some people just need to be hit on the head. Sometimes you just can't reason with anybody. You got to bop them over the head. I just, and that may be what this is, all this means. The other thing that's interesting here, mine says blows that hurt. What does your translation say? The first part of that verse.
Blows that wound.
Blows that wound. Anything else?
Stripes that wound. Mhm.
Stripes that. Okay. So what's interesting is, again, back in the Hebrew, when it says blows that wound or blows that hurt, it really says blue, B-L-U-E, wounds. In other words, wounds that bruise, wounds that leave a mark. So the other thing I think that's here is when God disciplines, sometimes he leaves a mark. Sometimes he leaves something in you to remember that stupid thing that you did that got you into sin, such that you won't do it again. I think that's in this.
Yeah.
Blows that bruise cleanse away evil. You got a bruise, you got a mark, you got a stripe. You got something where God has left and said, yeah, you remember that, don't you? You remember that stupid thing. You remember that there was actually consequences for that sin. And those consequences are these bruises that leave a mark. Okay, we'll stop there. So just to tell you how I'm terrible at studying. I studied all the way through chapter 21, not knowing how long we were going to go. So I never know how far we're going to go in Proverbs. Sometimes we're short, sometimes we're long. So we're ready for next week.
Hey, Rich.
Yes, sir.
Question. So we talk, yeah, sounds like we should be, we talk about standing in our armor. Sounds like we should be on the offensive, but we're waiting for the wise people to give us our orders. But we end up standing there in our clean armor with our orders, and we stand still. So we're not going on the offensive. We're more or less waiting for the defensive.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's our problem. And I think, and unfortunately, I think the way this is often taught is to tell us, well, all we got to do is stand, just stand firm. No, tag nabbit, that's not what it's about. And the other part, if you go back to the verses in Corinthians, right, you'll see there it's all about obedience. So be obedient to the commands that the chief has given us already. And those commands are all about being on the attack, going forward, spreading the gospel, teaching, being a servant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All the things that Christ has told us already to do. That is being offensive in the battle. We don't have to wait on any more commands. We've had all the commands given to us. Just start being obedient and you'll be in the battle. Any other thoughts?
I have a question on something you did in 1 Timothy. I read one verse too far.
Yeah, never do that.
Yeah. We believe once saved, always saved. But verse 20 in 1 Timothy 1:20 says that God sent two people to Satan because they need to be taught not to blaspheme.
Yeah, that's for another day.
I'll stop reading ahead.
That's for another day. And because, again, for another day.
Okay.
There's more, there's bigger context in order to understand what he's saying there. All right. Anything else? Anybody else read verses that we're not covering?
Rich, did you talk to one of my neighbors the other night?
Did he attack you, Russell? Oh,
Well,
yeah, I did.
They just described whoever it was as a tall, good-looking, gray-headed man, and I had no idea who they were talking about.
The funniest part in that conversation was we parked by Curtis's house the other night in what was probably an illegal parking place, and his neighbor came out and said, "Who are you visiting?" And I said, "Well, I'm visiting, Curtis and Melody." "Oh yeah, I remember you." I'm like, huh? "Yeah, I remember you." It's like, okay, fine. It was a weird interchange with them. Yeah, I was that good-looking guy though, Curtis, definitely.
Yeah. Parking police.
All right, anything else? Let's move into prayer requests. Let me start with one here. So first of all, Joe's not here because we got the two Trisha's girls in the other room, and she's taking care of them and keeping them quiet so I can teach. But my prayer request is actually for Emily. Emily is our daughter at Regent. She hurt herself playing soccer. Oh, stop this recording. Yeah, thanks. She hurt herself playing soccer and dislocated her patella. Looks like